Most people think healing will make them happier. Carl Jung believed something far more disturbing. He believed healing first makes you dangerous. Not dangerous in the violent sense. Dangerous because you begin seeing things that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Patterns, contradictions, hidden motives behind ordinary behavior. You start noticing how often people confuse attachment with love, control with care, and obedience with connection. And once that perception changes, you can no longer participate in certain relationships the same way. The laughter still sounds normal. The conversations still happen. But underneath it, you begin sensing invisible negotiations taking place inside almost every interaction. Who needs validation? Who needs control? Who fears abandonment? Who survives by manipulating perception? Suddenly, human behavior stops looking random. It starts looking predictable. As Jung wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their own soul. And if you observe carefully, you begin realizing how true that really is. Some people stay busy to avoid themselves. Some stay desirable. Some stay needed. Some stay wounded. Because pain can become an identity, and identities do not disappear quietly. That is why healing often creates conflict long before it creates peace. The moment you stop tolerating what once felt normal, people begin reacting to you differently. Not because you became cruel, but because you became harder to control. A person who fears abandonment can be guilted. A person starving for validation can be manipulated. A person afraid of loneliness will betray themselves just to keep someone close. But a person who has confronted their inner emptiness becomes unpredictable. They no longer beg for closeness that costs them their self-respect. And this is where the real transformation begins. Not when you love yourself, not when you become confident, but when you finally notice how much of your previous tolerance came from psychological survival. Because most people are not patient. They are afraid to leave. Most people are not understanding. They are emotionally dependent. Most people are not too nice. They are terrified that rejection will confirm what they secretly believe about themselves, so they endure things that slowly destroy them. Disrespect, inconsistency, humiliation disguised as jokes, emotional neglect disguised as independence. And they call it love because the alternative is facing a terrifying possibility that many of their relationships only survived because they had no boundaries. People don't always react to your healing with admiration. Sometimes they react with irritation, distance, subtle hostility, because your growth forces them to confront the version of you they benefited from. The unsettling part about healing is that it rarely begins with strength. It usually begins with exhaustion, not dramatic exhaustion, a quieter kind. The kind that comes from constantly translating your pain into something socially acceptable. Smiling when you feel resentment building underneath your skin, pretending certain comments don't bother you. Staying emotionally available for people who disappear the moment you need the same in return. For years you call it maturity. Then one day you realize it was survival. Jung believed that the personality most people present to the world is often a mask, a carefully constructed identity designed to gain acceptance, avoid rejection, and maintain belonging. He called this the persona. The terrifying thing about the persona is that eventually even you start believing it. You become the understanding one, the calm one, the reliable one, the easygoing one. And because people grow comfortable with that version of you, they begin expecting it permanently. They stop seeing your humanity. They start seeing your function. That's why healing shocks people, because the role suddenly changes. The person who always tolerated disrespect begins going silent. The person who always over-explained starts saying less. And others interpret this as arrogance. But often it's the first honest thing you've done in years. People don't resent your weakness. They resent the possibility that you might outgrow them. That realization, changes the atmosphere around you. You begin noticing how many social interactions are built on invisible power dynamics rather than genuine connection. Some people only feel safe around you when you are uncertain about yourself. Some relationships survive only because you were carrying all the emotional weight alone, and healing quietly removes your willingness to carry it. Once self-respect enters the room, many relationships lose the chemistry that kept them alive. You stop laughing at things that humiliate you. You stop rewarding inconsistency. You stop chasing closure from people committed to misunderstanding you. And strangely, this doesn't always make you feel powerful. Sometimes it makes you feel deeply alone because awareness isolates before it liberates. You notice how some people are drawn to your wounds, not your soul. Your insecurity made them feel powerful. Your emotional availability made them feel important. Your lack of boundaries made them feel safe from accountability. But now, something inside you has shifted. You no longer confuse attention with care. You start realizing some people never loved you. They loved their access to you, your silence, your forgiveness, your emotional labor, your patience, not you. And once that enters your mind, ordinary interactions begin feeling strangely hollow. You start hearing manipulation hidden inside concern, possessiveness hidden inside affection, envy hidden inside jokes. The social world begins revealing its shadow. And the worst part is that most people don't even know they're doing it. Once you begin seeing clearly, very little of human behavior is fully conscious. People speak in rational language, but beneath the surface, older forces are moving them. Insecurity, fear, envy, loneliness, shame, the desperate need to feel significant. Jung understood this better than most. He believed every human being carries a shadow, the hidden part of themselves they refuse to acknowledge, the impulses they deny, the traits they condemn in others because they cannot face them within themselves. And the shadow does not disappear because it is ignored. It leaks into friendships, into love, into family, especially into the people closest to us. That's why healing changes your perception so violently. You begin noticing that many conflicts are not actually about the surface issue at all. The friend angry at your success is not upset about your success. They are confronting their own stagnation through you. The partner accusing you of changing is often terrified of losing control over the dynamic they grew comfortable with. Awareness transforms ordinary conversations into psychological mirrors, and most people hate mirrors because mirrors force confrontation. A person comfortable living unconsciously will always feel unsettled around someone becoming conscious. Most relationships don't end when respect disappears. They end when awareness appears. That's the part nobody warns you about. Healing doesn't just reveal others, it reveals you, the versions of yourself you created to survive. You begin remembering how often you abandon your instincts just to maintain connection. How many times your body sensed danger before your mind allowed itself to admit it. And slowly, an uncomfortable truth emerges. Many people are not afraid of losing relationships. They are afraid of losing access to validation, to emotional labor, to control, to familiarity. That's why boundaries provoke such intense reactions. Healthy people may not always like your boundaries, but they usually respect them. Manipulative people experience boundaries as rejection because your limits interfere with their access. Many people will only love you as long as you remain useful to their emotional needs. The moment you become difficult to control, difficult to guilt, difficult to drain, suddenly you are selfish, cold, too much. But what actually changed is simpler than that. You stop negotiating against yourself. There comes a point in healing where you stop asking, "Why did they treat me that way?" and begin asking something far more dangerous. Why did I accept it for so long? Jung believed that what remains unconscious controls us from beneath the surface. Many people unconsciously repeat painful relationship patterns because familiarity feels safer than freedom. The nervous system prefers predictable pain over unfamiliar peace. That's why people return to relationships that drain them, why they confuse emotional chaos with passion, why they feel strangely uncomfortable around healthy love. The wounded mind often interprets calmness as emptiness because it was trained to associate intensity with connection. The human mind will cling to what is familiar even when it is destroying itself. And that includes identities, especially identities. For years, maybe your identity was built around being needed, being chosen, being understanding, being emotionally available no matter how poorly others treated you. And healing threatens that entire structure. Because if you are no longer sacrificing yourself for approval, who are you? If you stop rescuing everyone, who still calls? Those questions create a terrifying emptiness because healing is not just losing unhealthy people. Sometimes it feels like losing the entire personality you built to survive loneliness. And in that silence, you begin noticing how much of society rewards self-abandonment. People praise you when you overgive. They admire your patience when it benefits them. They call you mature when you tolerate disrespect quietly. But the moment you prioritize your own psychological well-being, the tone changes. Now you're distant, hard to reach, changed. Most social systems are designed to preserve comfort, not truth. And healed people become disruptive because they stop participating in emotional performances that keep dysfunctional dynamics alive. Many relationships survive not because they are healthy, but because one person is willing to tolerate emotional imbalance indefinitely. Once tolerance disappears, the relationship begins revealing what it truly was. That's why healing often feels like waking up inside your own life, suddenly recognizing the architecture of every interaction around you. The power dynamics, the emotional dependencies, the invisible negotiations happening underneath ordinary conversation. And after enough awareness, you can no longer return to sleep. You stop listening only to words. You start studying patterns. The delay before someone replies when you finally stop initiating. The change in energy when you become confident. The discomfort certain people feel when you no longer need their validation. Most people reveal themselves not through what they claim, but through what consistently repeats. The conscious mind speaks in language. The unconscious speaks in patterns. You notice how some people need you insecure because your insecurity keeps the hierarchy intact. As long as you doubt yourself, they remain psychologically above you. Many relationships are built on unconscious agreements that are rarely spoken aloud. I will stay small so you feel comfortable. I will overgive so you don't leave. I will suppress my needs so this connection survives. Healing breaks the contract. And when the contract breaks, people often reveal who they truly are beneath politeness. Some become defensive. Some accuse you of changing. Some try to pull you back into your old identity, the agreeable version, the guilty version, because people feel safest when you remain psychologically predictable. Growth makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability threatens control. There's a disturbing truth hidden inside many social interactions. Some people do not want connection. They want access to your attention, your reassurance, your emotional energy, your softness. And the moment access becomes limited, the affection fades, the effort disappears, the warmth turns conditional. A large percentage of human relationships are transactional beneath the surface, not always financially, but emotionally, psychologically, socially. People stay where their emotional needs are fed. That realization can make the world feel colder. For a while, you may even become emotionally detached, hyper-aware, suspicious of everyone. But Jung warned about this too. The goal is not to become numb. The goal is to become conscious without becoming consumed by bitterness. And that requires confronting something even deeper than other people's behavior, your own shadow. The shadow is not just the darkness inside you. It is the version of yourself you were taught to hide in order to remain loved. Your anger, your selfishness, your ambition, your envy, your need for recognition, your capacity to leave. Most people spend their entire lives trying to appear good while burying every trait that might threaten acceptance. But buried emotions do not disappear. They wait, and eventually they begin controlling behavior from underneath the personality. That's why people who suppress anger often become passive-aggressive. Why people who deny insecurity become obsessed with superiority. Why people who pretend to be endlessly selfless secretly resent everyone around them. The shadow always finds expression, consciously or destructively. Healing forces you into confrontation with this hidden part of yourself, and honestly, this stage terrifies most people. Because it's easier to see manipulation in others than dependency within yourself. Easier to notice narcissism in others than control within yourself. Easier to condemn betrayal than confront your own fear of abandonment. But real awareness destroys this illusion of moral purity. You begin realizing that even your good behaviors sometimes had unconscious motives beneath them. You weren't always kind purely from love. Sometimes you were kind because you feared rejection. You weren't always patient because you were emotionally mature. Sometimes you were patient because confrontation terrified you. The mind wants to divide people into good and bad, victim and villain, healthy and toxic. But the deeper you understand human nature, the more complicated everything becomes. Everyone carries contradictions. The same person capable of deep love may also be capable of manipulation. The same person capable of loyalty may also betray when fear overwhelms them. Human beings are not stable creatures. They are psychological battlegrounds, and once you truly understand this, you stop expecting perfection from others. But you also stop romanticizing them. You begin noticing how often people fall in love with fantasies rather than reality, projecting idealized identities onto each other, because seeing clearly would destroy the illusion holding the connection together. Most relationships survive through selective blindness. Healing removes that blindness. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility, because intense connection does not always mean healthy connection. Sometimes, trauma recognizes trauma. Sometimes, wounds recognize wounds. And people mistake psychological familiarity for destiny. If any of this is landing somewhere real in you, leave a like, a quiet acknowledgement that you've started turning the mirror toward your own shadow, not only theirs. But eventually, healing creates a strange emotional shift. You no longer crave intensity the same way. You start craving truth, even if the truth is colder, even if it ruins illusions you once needed in order to feel loved. Because illusions comfort the ego, but they quietly destroy the soul. Your whole relationship with loneliness begins to change. At first, loneliness felt like rejection. Now it starts feeling like clarity. You realize how much noise existed in your life simply because silence forced you to confront yourself. How many relationships were maintained not from connection, but from fear of being alone with your own thoughts. Most people would rather remain emotionally crowded than psychologically honest, because silence reveals things. It reveals dependency. It reveals insecurity. It reveals how often attention was used as anesthesia against emptiness. And when healing strips those distractions away, many people panic. They rush back toward old relationships and old patterns, not because those things were good for them, but because unconscious suffering feels more familiar than conscious solitude. That is why so many people sabotage their own healing. Awareness becomes unbearable when identity has been built around dysfunction, because healing does not only remove pain, it removes the identities attached to pain. And identity loss feels like death to the ego. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Most people read that sentence intellectually. Few understand what it actually means. Consciousness hurts because it forces you to watch illusions collapse in real time. And perhaps the darkest realization of all, some people only fit into your life when you hated yourself. That realization changes the emotional atmosphere permanently. You begin understanding why certain relationships suddenly stop functioning once your self-respect grows. Your healing disrupts the emotional hierarchy the relationship depended on. The insecure version of you was easier to control, easier to guilt, easier to manipulate through fear of abandonment. But the healed version becomes dangerous. Not violent, not cruel, just unwilling. And this creates distance between you and the world around you, because most social environments quietly depend on unconscious compromise. People tolerate what drains them because confrontation risks isolation. But once awareness fully enters your life, peace becomes more attractive than attachment. You stop trying to convince people of your value. You stop forcing emotional intimacy with people incapable of meeting you deeply. And in that state, something cold but liberating emerges. You realize that many people never actually saw you. They saw the role you played in their emotional world: the healer, the listener, the pursuer, the forgiving one. Healing stripped the performance away, and once the performance disappeared, so did many of the relationships. You begin noticing how fragile most identities really are, how quickly kindness disappears when someone feels embarrassed, how fast loyalty changes when status enters the room, how often morality bends under loneliness, desire, fear, or social pressure. Human beings like to imagine themselves as rational creatures, but most behavior is emotional survival wearing intellectual clothing. People betray values to preserve belonging. They betray people to preserve ego. They betray themselves to avoid abandonment. The deeper you look into human psychology, the harder it becomes to see anyone as entirely innocent, including yourself, especially yourself. Because eventually, healing forces one final confrontation. You realize that part of your suffering came from wanting reality to be emotionally softer than it truly is. You wanted loyalty to guarantee permanence. You wanted love to guarantee honesty. You wanted effort to guarantee reciprocity. But human nature does not operate according to fairness. People change when emotions change, needs change, fears change, and many connections that feel eternal are actually temporary psychological alignments between two unfinished people. That can make the world feel unbearably cold at first, until another realization quietly replaces it. The point of healing was never to become naive enough to trust everyone, nor cynical enough to trust no one. It was to see clearly, to stop demanding permanence from temporary things, to stop confusing emotional intensity with meaning, to stop sacrificing yourself, trying to earn what should be given freely. You are no longer relating to people from hunger. You are relating from awareness. You stop asking, "Do they like me?" and begin asking, "Who do I become around them?" Because some people pull you toward anxiety, some toward self-doubt, some toward emotional exhaustion, and others toward peace. Real healing teaches you to notice the difference, not through words, but through your nervous system, through the silence after conversations, through whether your spirit expands or contracts around certain people. Because the body notices what the mind tries to rationalize. The more you heal, the less you tolerate. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you finally understand the cost of betraying yourself. Once you've experienced the psychological exhaustion of abandoning your own instincts long enough, peace stops feeling lonely. It starts feeling sacred. And maybe that is the final tragedy of human nature. Most people never lose others. They lose themselves trying not to. They spend years tolerating disrespect to avoid loneliness, then wake up one day disconnected from their own instincts, smiling in rooms that quietly drain them. But healing changes that, not loudly, quietly, like a door inside your mind, slowly closing against everything that once consumed you. And once that door closes, you realize peace was never emptiness. It was freedom from performance, freedom from chasing, freedom from shrinking yourself so others could remain comfortable around your wounds. Because the deepest form of loneliness was never being alone. It was being disconnected from yourself while surrounded by everyone else. So now I want to ask you something. What is one behavior, relationship, or pattern you used to tolerate that you can no longer ignore after healing? Comment it below. And if this gave words to something you've been living, share it with someone walking the same quiet path, and subscribe to keep going deeper.